Roland Barthes' 1967 essay The Death of the Author is a pivotal work in literary theory and poststructuralism. It challenges the traditional role of the author in interpreting texts, advocating instead for the primacy of the reader. Barthes dismantles the concept of the author as a singular source of meaning, arguing that the text is a multidimensional space where numerous writings blend and interact. This essay shifts the focus of literary criticism from the intentions of the author to the experience of the reader and the autonomy of the text itself. The author as a limitation of meaning. Barthes opens his essay by questioning the authority traditionally attributed to the author. In conventional literary criticism, the author has been viewed as the origin of a text's meaning, with their intentions serving as a definitive guide to interpretation. This approach, Barthes argues, limits the potential meanings of a text by binding it to the author's personal context, biography, and intent. He critiques this practice as reductive, claiming that it treats the text as a direct expression of the author's ideas, history, and personality. Barthes calls this tendency a form of author worship that subordinates the reader and suppresses the multiplicity of meanings inherent in the text. The role of language in texts. Barthes emphasizes the primacy of language in constructing meaning. He aligns with structuralist and poststructuralist thought, which views language as a system of signs independent of the individual who uses it. For Barthes, the author is merely a scripter, someone who arranges pre-existing linguistic structures and conventions rather than originating meaning. This perspective de-emphasizes the author's creative genius and highlights the impersonal nature of textual production. A text, Barthes asserts, is not a single, unified message but a tissue of quotations, drawn from countless cultural and literary sources. The writer does not create from nothing but reconfigures a web of existing ideas, phrases, and narratives. The text is a multidimensional space. Barthes envisions the text as a multidimensional space where various writings intersect. This metaphor underscores the intertextuality of literature, the idea that every text is connected to other texts through references, allusions, and shared cultural codes. Since the text is inherently polysemous, it resists being tied to a single authoritative interpretation. Barthes illustrates this with the example of storytelling. When a writer narrates, the act of narration depends on a broader cultural repertoire of narrative structures, genres, and conventions. The originality of the text lies not in the author's unique intent but in the interplay of these cultural elements within the text. The death of the author. Barthes' titular declaration, "The death of the author," is a provocative metaphor for the dissolution of the author's dominance over textual interpretation. He does not mean that authors should literally disappear or stop writing but rather that their role as the definitive source of meaning must be rejected. In Barthes' view, the author's biography, emotions, and intentions are irrelevant to understanding the text. Instead, the meaning of a text arises in the act of reading. Barthes argues that it is the reader who gives life to the text by engaging with it and constructing its meaning. By killing the author, Barthes liberates the text, allowing it to function as an open and dynamic space of interpretation. The birth of the reader. Barthes contrasts the death of the author with the birth of the reader. This shift in focus places the reader at the center of the interpretive process. For Barthes, the reader is not a passive recipient of the author's ideas but an active participant in creating meaning. Each reader brings their own cultural context, experiences, and perspective to the text, generating multiple interpretations. This democratization of interpretation aligns with poststructuralist ideas of decentered meaning. By removing the author from the equation, Barthes challenges hierarchical structures of authority in literature and opens up texts to a plurality of readings. Implications for literary criticism. Barthes' essay has far-reaching implications for literary theory and criticism. It calls for a move away from biographical and author-centric approaches, such as new criticism and traditional hermeneutics, and toward more reader-focused and text-centered methodologies. The essay also aligns with broader intellectual movements that question fixed meanings and embrace ambiguity and multiplicity. Barthes' ideas resonate with later developments in deconstruction and cultural studies, which further explore the instability of meaning and the interplay of power and ideology in texts. His emphasis on intertextuality has also influenced contemporary understandings of literature as a network of interconnected works rather than isolated creations. Critiques and limitations. While the death of the author has been widely influential, it has also faced criticism. Some argue that Barthes' dismissal of the author oversimplifies the role of creativity and individual agency in writing. Others point out that authorship can be significant in historical, political, and cultural contexts, especially when marginalized voices assert their identity through literature. For instance, post-colonial and feminist theorists have highlighted the importance of the author's identity in challenging dominant narratives and power structures. In these contexts, the author's intent and experiences can provide valuable insights into the text's meaning. Conclusion. In The Death of the Author, Roland Barthes radically redefines the relationship between the author, the text, and the reader. By rejecting the traditional notion of the author as the ultimate source of meaning, Barthes empowers the reader and liberates the text from fixed interpretations. His essay is a cornerstone of post-structuralist thought and continues to provoke debate about authorship, interpretation, and the nature of literature. Ultimately, Barthes' work challenges us to rethink how we engage with texts and to embrace the complexity and diversity of meaning that literature offers. By shifting the focus from the author to the reader, Barthes transforms the act of reading into a creative and dynamic process.